your first album. It's kind of a survey of wonderful music by Black composers. It's called Roots, which I love, which kind of says it all. And I was just thinking about the difference between us in how we've come to this music and how fortunate you are, I think, that you've come up, in your life from a young age, having awareness of this music, having support and mentorship to find this music. For me, it was a very, very solitary journey, just kind of in the dark for so long until, I finally gathered momentum around it. So I'd love to hear from you how it's been to find your roots in music.
As you said, I'm really fortunate to have had pathways through which I can access this music and learn more about it. My first experience playing music by a composer of color was as a part of the Sphinx competition. And it was one of Grant Still's spiritual arrangements of Here's One. And that was part of the sort of audition tape requirements. And it was so strikingly beautiful and so different than pretty much any other music that I had played, arranged or original composition. But there was I think, subconscious part of me that I was, oh my gosh, this is awesome, but I have concertos to learn. And at such a young age, looking back on it, I'm like, wow, how could I have been so sort of closed-minded? And it wasn't really until a couple of years ago when I really look back and say, okay, wow, these are some things that I've been neglecting. This is some music, and these are some incredible artists that I haven't taken the time to learn about.
This conversation about why that music seemed tangential to you when you were so young. You just referred to the rest of it as the staples, why we are still existing in a world where that is the canon. And I feel like it's a huge part of the reckoning, actually, of the next generation of young artists, because it hasn't made sense for the longest time.
Yeah, absolutely. A large part of my inspiration behind this project was, if I have catching up to do about this music, imagine what, the greater majority of the field, how much work we really have to do. And I think with each passing day and each passing week and month, especially over this past year in 2020, you could almost see this wave of reckoning, like you were saying, and just people starting to realize, I say starting, only starting to realize really the magnitude of the body of work that we've just not paid any attention to.
The real thing here is to redefine what is the music that is fed to us, that nurtures us throughout our journey.
I mean, that's a huge realization for so many people, even in the last year, the idea that this canon is really so incredibly exclusive, and I think makes the art form as a whole that much less sort of accessible and inviting for people from so many different walks of life and so many different backgrounds. So I think, for me, one of my passions has been really doing everything I can and taking every opportunity I can to connect with communities that aren't necessarily a part of the classical music world, and just invite them in and show them that, this is an art form that is beautiful, and for me personally has brought so much joy and so many meaningful moments and people into my life. And if I can inspire one person every concert to take a deeper look at what this is and what this is about, then I feel like I'm sort of on the right track.
Yeah, it's what you said. It's opening the door, right? It's not educating. I feel like sometimes the message is, you need to know this, right? It's not. It's just like, guess what? This is a much bigger thing. And that solves this classical music problem, which is that, as you say, so many people perceive this art form as old and dead and boring and dusty, all of those things. I don't know which one comes first. But, to just, to highlight the vibrancy of it. And there's also something so important about the representational part of it. When I hear you talk about doing the Sphinx competition when you were you were like 12, right? I think.
Yeah, I think I was 13 when I actually made it there for the competition.
So think back in your mind, because that must have been a formative moment, like just to be in that environment of other young musicians of color and like united within this community of support. I did not have an entree into that world. I didn't connect with Sphinx until I won the Medal of Excellence in 2015. And until then, I didn't know anyone in my line of work who looked anything like me.
There was a sort of dichotomy to that. First, introduction into the Sphinx community and the Sphinx family, and one of which was just a true feeling of belonging and, like you said, being part of a community. And on the other hand, there was the realization that, okay, wow, this is like, I actually am different from so many other people, most people that I know and have met who are doing this. And I have something so special in common with so many of these people that I met at Sphinx and have met through Sphinx and continue to stay in touch with. I think this idea of like otherness and this idea of we're one of the few. And whenever we hear about these, African American composers, so often it's the first. Oh, Florence Price was the first woman, or Grant Still was the first man to do this and that. And that truly was a light bulb moment for me.
Except that they weren't. They were and they weren't.
Right,
they
exactly,
were only
exactly.
doing the thing that they could do because of the shoulders, that they were standing on. And yes, there were big doors to break down, but they were doing it within the context of community. I mean, I love everything that I have learned and understood. I mean, Florence Price is such a great example, right? Because that energy of the migration and all of these people coming to, I mean, not unlike going to the Sphinx competition, right? Like you arrive in this one place and you're like, oh my God, there are all these other people like me, and and stuff happens. Collaboration happens, creativity happens. I really love thinking about that. It's my favorite little anecdote that I've learned. 1921, 100 years ago exactly, Shuffle Along opens on Broadway. U.B. Blake, the first all-Black show on Broadway, hit show. Langston Hughes calls that the start of the Harlem Renaissance. And then I'm doing all my research, and I find out that William Grant Still was playing oboe in the pit for Shuffle Along. All these people were just, building on each other. Everybody talks all the time about how change is slow and change is one thing at a time and little steps, and it's so true, but there's something exponential about what's happening now, at least within our tiny little world. It's been so interesting just doing this show because I realize how present, how vibrant, how powerful and impactful artists of color are in our current culture. And when you aggregate that, it's very moving.
It's clear as day now, much more so than it even was a couple of years ago, but there is a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of changes to be made. And I think there's so much energy surrounding this newfound awareness and desire to really discover and dig deeper and really learn about and develop cohesive and inclusive perception of what the history of our art form is. And it's going to have to really keep up and ramp up even more, I think, if we really want to see the changes that we want to see. It's inspiring, but at the same time, it's almost like a fire under your ass in a way, because it's like, wow, there really is so much more purpose to what it is that I'm doing and what it is that so many others are doing. And so many people are now discovering that purpose. And I think once that purpose is discovered, the possibilities really are endless.
I totally agree.
The fact that so many more people are coming on board is really exciting.
I don't have any faith that history is a straight line. We know that by now. But I think what it is grabbing a hold of this moment because, like I said, the change that we can make in terms of just the presence and the message and the embedding of our, our work and our vision into the culture, that takes hold. That doesn't then go away. I want to tell you something. Right. I think I've had a revelation. And, this has been so fast, like all of a sudden from one day to the next, oh, Black people wrote music too. Oh, now you have to play it. Oh, now you have to know all about it, right? And people are freaking out. Like there are people who have been teaching at the top of their profession for 40 years and they maybe never heard of Florence Price. And literally that's okay. But now they feel like the whole world is coming at them that they missed Florence Price somehow, right? And I think that there's a step that was missed, which is that still, forget about Black composers versus white composers. We don't know anything about the history of American concert music. We spend our lives in practice rooms working on music from another continent, from another century. And then we leap over this whole thing, which explains all these stories. So now I have a new mission. I mean, it's not new. I've been doing this for for a bunch of years, but now I have a mission to just teach the history. And I don't mean that in a dusty sense. I mean, the living history.
Absolutely. I mean,
do you agree?
One of the things that, absolutely. One of my focuses in my sort of discovery and study and eventually recording of the music on this album in particular was that, I've always had this sense, especially with contemporary music these days, where there's such a push for supporting and advancing classical music as a whole. I mean, people are still writing music as they have been for hundreds of years, but I oftentimes have a lot of trouble sort of connecting with the music in a personal and emotional way. And I think with so much of this music, you're saying it's our music, it's our culture. I feel an instant sense of empathy with what these people experienced and therefore what they are saying through their music. And that for me makes for such a meaningful, not only music making experience, but just an experience in and of itself for me as an artist who is discovering and learning about these voices and these stories and these personalities. I mean, as difficult as it is to put together, I mean, I always think about the fact, and it kind of makes me a little angry about, we have letters from every month of every year of Mozart's life. We can piece his life together bit by bit and know with certainty that this is most likely what happened. But there's so much speculation and imagination that goes into really dissecting and starting to look at these people's lives and again, their experiences, which are directly translated through the music.
And when you talk about the canon, I mean, I think that another really interesting thing is like tradition, how many teachers have taught this same music and passed down so many traditions that we frankly don't really think about it anymore. So to have this new body of work that can be questioned and it can be changed, that's also this breath of life, I think, that we're talking about.
But I think learning about these influences, learning about these relationships, these links, also informs our perspective on music that's already in the canon.
Yes, exactly.
So, I'm just so excited to see everything that comes out of it and really to listen and learn to all of the things that people are discovering about this music and how it carries over into so many different traditions, right, that are part of this thing that we know as the history of classical music, whatever that even means. But
well, and also, I mean, I hope you're staying really present and connected to the fact that this puts us in this chain of lineage, like, right? And that comes with privilege and responsibility, but I feel that really deeply. I mean, I'm part of
absolutely
the lineage of Schumann and, Beethoven and everybody else. Yes. But, this is what I think I get to pass on, and you too.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really so exciting. And, for me personally, I feel like taking the first step, really. I mean, I feel like this is just the tip of the iceberg. And, to be able to invite people in along the way and also to be able to, grab bits and pieces of what I learned from other artists and from other people who are invested in this journey as well. I have such a wholesome vision for the future of this art form and collaboration, just a complete shakeup of what we know to be the tradition, the culture around what it is that we do. And that's just so exciting because, I mean, this is one of the very, very many things, especially in this country, in the US, that really needs some shaking up and some updating,
Yeah, some good trouble, right?
Absolutely.